Keith, we were talking about this on the show this morning on our podcast, that Trevor Lawrence, if he plays, very good start. But if he's out, what does that mean for the receivers? I got to start with the quarterback situation there. Lawrence in, you trust him?
Lawrence in, he'd be a top 10 quarterback for me if it wasn't for the fact that Derek Carr is playing tonight. So you have to play Derek Carr over him on Thursday night. He's still in that top 12 discussion. This Titans defense, very, very good against the run. Surrenders the most pass attempts per game of any defense and haven't been particularly good against the pass either. As for the pass catchers, Christian Kirk, a high-end number 2 wide receiver with Lawrence, low-end number 2 without him.
How do you feel?
I feel like Lawrence is in that top 12-ish discussion. I don't have him in my top 12. I like a lot of quarterbacks this week, but he's close to it. Christian Kirk is the one that I'd like. He's a must-start at this point anyway, especially in full PPR.
Even if it's Beathard?
If it's Beathard, it's going to change. But obviously with Lawrence and the matchup against the Titans, you got to feel pretty good about Christian Kirk having a good game. And the rest of the offense, I think it's like, if you don't have a better option than Evan Engram or Zay Jones, you just go with them and you try and take advantage of this game plan that they should have. You know, the guy I'm worried about in this offense is Travis Etienne. Hasn't played well lately. There's a foot injury in play. Tough matchup against Tennessee. They're going to need Trevor Lawrence if they're going to win this game.
You're a little bit more encouraged, though, about Zay Jones, correct?
I think he's a mid-range number 3 wide receiver. Still saw 7 targets last week. He hasn't had a catch rate problem all season long, so I'm not going to ding him too much for last week. I think he's going to see 8 or 9 targets in this game. He's been about that average over the last month.
More than that.
You expect 5-6 catches for 70-ish yards.
10-ish PPR range, maybe a little bit better than that.
I'd say. 12 to 13.
31 targets his last 3 games, so hopefully they do go back to him. But again, just keep an eye on Trevor Lawrence's injury situation. And we will see the Jaguars throwing a lot if Trevor Lawrence does start. Some other quarterback injuries that we're keeping an eye on there. Lamar Jackson, big one clearly, but he's not expected to play, dealing with the knee injury. Tua Tagovailoa, limited practice. He is expected to go. And then Ryan Tannehill, limited practice as well. Same thing, should be able to get out there, but Treylon Burks may not play. So keep that in mind when it comes to Ryan Tannehill. Some of the running back stories that we're looking at here, the big one is in Cincinnati with Joe Mixon returning to practice, but again, still in the concussion protocol, so he's not fully cleared yet. I'm sorry. Let's back up. Before we get to the running backs, I got one big quarterback story to talk about, and that's Desmond Ridder being named the starting quarterback for the Falcons. They're going to turn to him after the bye. I was thinking about the guys on week 14, so looking at the lineups for this week. But in terms of Desmond Ridder starting for this week, Dave, what do you think about Ridder as a fantasy quarterback, fantasy option for the foreseeable future for the Falcons when he takes over?
I remember scouting him, and then I saw him in the preseason game against Detroit. He's okay. He can run an RPO offense or a zone read offense. He's ready to go with that. But a pro-style offense like we've seen a lot of from Atlanta this year, I don't know if I feel so good about him. And the Falcons had a chance 3 weeks ago. Mariota had that terrible Thursday game against Carolina. And they could have replaced Mariota then with Ridder. They didn't do it. That tells me that maybe Ridder isn't quite ready. Now they figured that their chances of winning the division are out the window, so they're going to see what they have in Ridder. I don't think it's going to be anything that turns Drake London into a megastar. He just needs volume in order to do that. Only a couple games this year where he's had more than 7 targets. I'm hoping that that's the trend that continues of what we saw in their last game. But you just look at these matchups, you don't feel great about Desmond Ridder suddenly bringing a passing presence to the Falcons.
So let's spend a little bit more time on Drake London, because that's clearly the bigger part of this, because he's coming off a big game, 6 for 95. Does he now take a step forward where you can look at him and say he's now potentially a must-start wide receiver, knowing that no Kyle Pitts, targets should be there for him, and it could be a good opportunity maybe with the young quarterback and young receiver to grow together?
Well, the targets should be there for him, but it's how many targets. Last week he needed a 50% target share. Half of the team's pass attempts went to him. I'm not really optimistic that Desmond Ridder is going to come in and make things better for Drake London. I think he gives London a little bit more upside. I think this could be a signal that, you know what, we recognize we're not in the division battle. Let's just let the young guys eat. Maybe we see more Tyler Algier in the running game as well. So maybe that. But I think he's a number 3 wide receiver at best, with week-to-week top 20 upside.
I will say, while it does not seem likely they're going to win the division, they are still mathematically alive, and maybe this is the spark that Arthur Smith is looking for to help them maybe catch the Bucs. We know the Bucs haven't exactly run away with the division, but we'll see what happens. Clearly Tampa Bay in the driver's seat. All right, now let's talk about Joe Mixon and the running back situation there in Cincinnati. Move a little bit quicker on some of these running back scenarios. So Heath, Joe Mixon in, must start. What does this mean for Samaje Perine?
Samaje Perine is a high-end flex. I still expect he'll catch 3 or 4 passes in this game, might even get a couple of carries. We've seen him score touchdowns with Joe Mixon in the game. Mixon's a top 12 guy. I've got Perine just inside my top 30 running backs. I would start him over someone like Kareem Hunt this week.
Okay, so we'll see how things go with the split. This is a good game to discover for both these guys moving forward, but obviously Joe Mixon back in the mix. We like him as a must-start running back. No surprise there. Michael Carter is off the injury report, Dave, and so Robert Saleh saying, quote, in terms of Bam Knight, he's not going anywhere. So give me the expectation for the Jets taking on the Bills. Knight, Now Carter, Ty Johnson, maybe James Robinson still.
I think you'll see Knight still as the main running back. He might lose some of those running down carries to Michael Carter, but I think Carter can also work as a passing downs back, and it could really limit how much we see from Ty Johnson. I think Zonovan Knight is still in line to see at least 15 touches. Tough matchup this week against Buffalo, but still makes the cut in PPR as a number 2 fantasy runner.
Might not be as tough. You know, we've seen some teams run on the Bills lately, and even the Jets a few weeks ago, week 9, both running backs in terms of Michael Carter and James Robinson has success against Buffalo, so maybe Zonovan Knight keeps it going. Certainly working the passing game has been fantastic with 8 catches since taking over for Michael Carter. Heath, we got the Seattle mess going on right now. So Ken Walker, DJ Dallas both did not practice on Wednesday. Travis Homer, who did not play in Week 13, was limited with a knee injury. He was out with an illness, but also dealing with his knee problem as well. They bring in Wayne Gallman on Tuesday. You got Tony Jones, who was playing without his contacts and was blind. Makes sense of Seattle taking on the Panthers this week.
If Walker can somehow get back, I'm going to start him. If DJ Dallas gets back, I might flex him. Otherwise, I'd really...
Dallas without Walker.
Without Walker, right. Otherwise, I really am very skeptical of the whole situation, especially if Travis Homer's back, because the hope for Tony Jones would be he's the only guy. He gets all the work in the passing game, all the work in the rushing game. With them bringing in Wayne Gallman, with the fact that we've already got Travis Homer back in practice, that seems really unlikely to me. I'd view Jones as a low-end flex. He would be behind Michael Carter and Samaje Perine for me.
All right, just something you got to keep an eye on there because it's good, very, very much in flux. But, you know, the best thing that could come out of it is that the Seahawks just throw all over the place. And Geno Smith, 37-plus pass attempts his last 2 games. We would love that for DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett because he likes to feature those guys. Dave, in that same game, Deontay Foreman dealing with a foot injury, did not practice on Wednesday, but he said, quote, he's 95% sure that he's going to play. I love the setup for Deontay Foreman. He's been great, as you see here, since Christian McCaffrey was traded in Week 7. But if he's not at 100%, give me the split between him and Chuba Hubbard.
If he's at 95%, I'm still going to start Deontay Foreman. He's 95% going to be in my lineup as at worst the number 2 fantasy running back. I do expect him to lose that passing downs work to Chuba Hubbard. But look, 110 or more rushing yards in 4 of his past 6 games. Literally every time he's had at least 15 carries, he's come through. This is a Seattle run defense that started to make some improvements after they let Cam Akers get some nice run in the first quarter last week, but I still think they're going to struggle at times. That's why Foreman is ranked so high for me.
Been miserable for the last 3 weeks, and so hopefully that continues for Foreman. Again, he's been doing a great job since McCaffrey was traded. The other injuries at running back that we're looking at here, Najee Harris did not practice on Wednesday. It's probably more of a maintenance thing, dealing with the oblique injury, just something to keep an eye on there, so maybe you want to roster Jaylen Warren just in case. Christian McCaffrey probably going to be on the injury report for the rest of the season as well, dealing with knee injury, should be okay. DeAndre Swift, as you know, if you watch Fantasy Football Today on Tuesday, he says he's going to be fine for this game against the Vikings, so love the setup for him, as we'll talk about a little bit later in the show. Let's transition now to the wide receivers. I think I got that right. So now we got Mike Williams dealing with the ankle injury. He was limited on Wednesday, but that's clearly a sign that he's trending in the right direction. So Williams plays. What do we think about him? And then the rest of the Chargers receiving core.
If he plays, he's a high-end number 3 wide receiver with top 12 upside. He would hurt Keenan Allen's upside just a little bit, and Keenan Allen's floor just a little bit. You're still starting Keenan Allen for sure. Josh Palmer right now without Williams, a high-end number 3 wide receiver. I would not have much interest in him if Mike Williams was able to play, and I'd also have less interest in Gerald Everett as a low-end tight end.
Makes a lot of sense because a lot of mouths to feed. They are going to throw the ball a lot. That's what the Chargers do. But tough defense on the other side, and we'll see how those offensive line woes continue to bother the Chargers and bother Justin Herbert. But Keenan Allen seems locked in. Mike Williams probably see Xavier Howard if he does come back. Josh Palmer could see Howard if he's the guy in place of Williams again. So just something to keep an eye on there. But Herbert, I'm sure, would love to have Mike Williams back on the field in a very big game for the Chargers as their playoff implications are on the line against Miami. The Broncos, Dave, they're going to get Courtland Sutton probably not back. So Jerry Jeudy's in a really good spot, and Craig Dulcich is coming off a big game. Kendall Hinton could obviously have an opportunity to make some plays as well. Talk about the Broncos with Sutton listed right now as potentially doubtful, not expected to go.
I'm loving it for Jerry Jeudy, who gets a lot of targets even when Sutton plays. Now, if Sutton's not going to play, Jeudy looked good last week. Put him right back into fantasy lineups as a number 2 fantasy option. Could be in line for 15 or more PPR points. Definitely get them going. They're going to have to throw a ton against Kansas City. And I like it for Dulcich, too. I love the volume that he had last week. He seemed to benefit the most from Courtland Sutton not being on the field. And Hinton benefited earlier this year when Jerry Jeudy was hurt. Now he would get that opportunity with Sutton gone. He might be in line for around 8 PPR points. You'd have to be pretty desperate to go with Kendall Hinton in your lineup. But those deep leagues out there, you're looking for guys with a pulse. He's got one.
All right, so we like Dulcich. We like Jeudy. Still don't like Russell Wilson, though, unfortunately, because he's just not been very good as a fantasy option. These guys are better in PPR than non-PPR because Russell just does not throw a lot of touchdowns. The wide receiver injuries that we're looking at here, we expect Waddle to be okay We hope to see Traylon Burks out there, but probably not looking good for him. Brandon Cooks and Nico Collins both dealing with injuries, but we expect Collins to go at this point. Cooks, you got to keep an eye on there. Kadarius Toney might be somebody you want to roster just in case he does play this week, but there is the story that Mecole Hardman could return next week, so probably limits the ceiling for Kadarius Toney. And then one thing that we'll find out today, but the Cardinals did have a walkthrough yesterday, and Rondale Moore not seen on the practice field, so still dealing with that groin injury. You may not have him for Monday night against the Patriots, but again, their official injury report will start on Thursday. The tight end injuries that we're looking at, Hayden Hurst, probably not going to play, dealing with the calf injury. David Njoku practiced on a limited basis, so trending in the right direction. And Cameron Brate practiced in full, so keep that in mind if you're looking at Cade Otton, who's been very good every time Brate has not been on the field, but unfortunately has struggled with Brate. So, Keith, David Njoku plays, must-start guy?
He will definitely be ranked inside the top 10. I would have him behind Greg Dulcich. I think I'd probably have him behind Gerald Everett if Mike Williams is out, but he'd be in that top 10, top 12 range for sure.
And we have not seen what he looks like with Deshaun Watson because he did not play in last week's win against the Texans.